Greetings, everybody. Mark Edward Lewis. This is my director's commentary on Mind Sifter, which is my directorial debut for Star Trek New Voyages, and what an incredible journey it's been. I'm never going to get to all the stories and things that happen here in production, but I'm going to do my best, and you'll excuse me if I'm not talking fast. It was 6 weeks really before production where they asked me to come on board after talking to 4 other directors who were either unable or they're just unable to direct it, scheduling and other things. So it was my pleasure to come in on this story by Shirley and be able to direct an episode that just really, to me, always delved into the what we love most about the original series and the characters. And it was a great challenge for me to work with, to bring this to life. And we shot, as you see here in this scene, this opening teaser at the Ticonderoga High School, which is where James Cawley went to high school, believe it or not. And this scene here with all these chairs, that's actually it's their auditorium built in the 30s. Just look, you can see the rustic nature of the chairs. It's just absolutely beautiful. And we couldn't not shoot here. In fact, this is the cage scene that's coming up later is also it's off in the wings, and it was just an amazing place to shoot. And they let us be there while all these kids were actually testing for their high school grades and to see if they'll graduate from high school. It was pretty intense. We had to be very quiet even while we're doing all this crazy action. And there is Becky Wood, Rivkah Raven Wood, and otherwise her stage name, who just hit this out of the park. I told James when I came on, I said, whoever's going to play Dr. Hamlin, it better just be a dynamo supreme. And she just completely was a complete collaborator. So was Brian, so was Brandon, so was Jeff, all these incredible actors who really should be doing A-list Hollywood stuff that we get to work with. This is one of those rooms where I don't know what it was, but it had a sink in it and it had this beautiful tile work. And but the problem was, in much of this stuff in the high school, there's all these modern fire alarms and wall outlets and all these things that our man Pony Horton had to take out, as did Tobias Richard and a few other people, which we will talk about when I do my post-production supervisor commentary, which is this. I'm going to keep pretty much to the story and the actors and the stories, because as a director, that's what really inspired me most. In fact, this opening is Darren Doctorman redo in 4:3. And 4:3 is an aspect ratio that's very square, you'll notice, not filmic, which is called 16:9 or 1.85. Slightly different, but this is the original television aspect ratio, and I wanted it to be that way because it seemed to me that because this story was so character-driven, there wasn't a lot of giant scenics that we needed to take our attention away from the faces of the actors. So I really wanted to go there and be as close as possible to the television show, and it just brings us there and leads us to be right in their faces the whole time. This is this entire insanity idea where Kirk and Spock are connected but not in the same time stream, and so it drives both of them insane. Spock able to handle it more because he's a Vulcan, but generally not doing so well. We see Spock and Brandon as Spock being very emotional, more than normal, because he's hearing all of the thoughts of Spock and of Kirk in his mind. And it's just this was actually Brandon's idea that came out of a plot flaw we had in the hallway scene later. And it turned into this whole new lore of Vulcans and Spock mind melding himself to find out what's going on with Kirk, to get at this psychic link that's holding them apart in the time streams. And we don't notice it in the City on the Edge Forever because they're together in that time stream, but split apart in that time stream. All the Vulcan mind melds that they've had creates this psychic tension that's only released in that hallway scene at the end where Brandon touches Brian. And we hear that release. And that was all Brian and Stacy coming up with this. He's basically, and I know I'm way ahead of myself, but we might as well talk about it. While we're looking at the window shot that Tobias Richter put in on a very plain wall on the set, Brandon said, I want to touch him when I see him at the end of the hallway. And I said, well, that's crazy, but Vulcan would never touch him. And we kind of argued for a while and came up with this incredible backstory that turned into this beautiful new lore, which I love. And this, of course, is the indomitable Robert Whithrow, who is now a recurring character and a great supporter of Star Trek, both when it was Phase 2 and now New Voyages. And that is the Eisenhower, I believe, tunic that James Cawley, the master seamstress and wardrobe man, seamster, I don't know. Well, wardrobe genius, guru, put together. And we shot it that day. What you're looking at is him putting that on for the very first time. Just really beautifully made. And this scene, it was kind of a celebration. By the time we were here, we'd caught up. We were shooting, and we were hours and hours and hours behind because of an accident or an issue that we had with the straitjacket that didn't actually arrive. James ordered it online, and it didn't arrive. On the day of shooting, we had nothing. So James, we're 5 hours back, and James said, I'm going to go build one. And in 2 hours, James was back with a completely functional, way better than the original that he had purchased, straitjacket. And that's what we shot with. It's amazing what he can do. And this scene was originally about 4.5 pages, and we cut it down in post just to get to the meat of what they're saying. And it's such a pivotal scene, these two, Spock being overridden. Oh, you'll notice there the color on his face is red, and it'll change to yellow and a few things. It's a computer screen. We have a child underneath the table plugging things in, actually changing the lights on the screen. Because earlier in the shoot, we had somebody fall and land on that monitor and break it to smithereens. And you're looking at it basically semi-assembled with there's nothing on the front of it. It's broken. So we couldn't, that's why it sort of turned there. This is such a powerful moment for Spock because the last thing he ever wanted is to be in command. He loves being in a support role. And here's Spock still being called to by Kirk, realizing he's being ordered to leave his best friend. And here is this beautiful scene where Brandon nails this of, I'm going to have to make a decision. And he actually asked me on set, he said, have I made the decision or am I making the decision? And we decided to make it while we're looking at him. While he's looking at it, he said, I now am going to have to break the rules and steal this ship. And this is the Tobias Richter version and all those beautiful graphics that Tobias always does. And, of course, the Darren Dochterman version is the other version. And the lovely Jasmine in the captain's chair, which is always lovely to see and inspired me to later in the movie have a completely all-women, all-female shift on the bridge. And originally there was a kind of a gag that I tried to leave in but didn't quite make it, of Sulu in the command chair there saying, skirts. But it didn't make it. Oh, well. These shots here, the corridor, are actually reshoots. We went back and got some more corridor scenes because by the time we had shot, the sets weren't actually built. The entire studio moved 10 months before we started this process of shooting this episode. So they were actually continually building the sets while we were shooting. So some of the none of the corridor stuff we shot during principal photography made it into the film. Those are all reshoots. And this bridge stuff, we shot basically a third of the movie in one day. Most of it on the bridge. We had a 20-hour day. This was actually early in the day, this stuff. But anytime you see a close-up, those are wee hours of the morning, and including the Whithrow on the Lexington on the bridge stuff. And I'm very happy to see a different computer monitor up there. You'll see an engine schematic up there on the header. There it is. And just the amount of tension between McCoy and Spock. One of the things I love most about this episode, both of these men are in a professional military position and they have no one they can talk to about anything except their best friend Kirk. They certainly can't talk to each other. And now that he's gone, they have no one to go to but each other, Spock and McCoy, and all of their aggression towards each other coming out from pain, an incredible amount of pain. and Spock trying to hide it, doing a terrible job of it. Brandon, of course, the actor, doing a great job. But them lashing at each other, as we'll see momentarily, at each other, just out of pain and a very human instinct. And then having it resolve and having them team up to save the captain. It's just such a beautiful story, subcontext that I'm not really sure was insinuated at in the book. And here, of course, is Spock realizing that he's all alone and no one to go to but this connection he has with Kirk, realizing he has to go away from where he needs to go to find Kirk. And here, when I first developed these scenes with Tobias and Darren, I wanted the Enterprise for the first time to go right to left. Always we see the Enterprise go left to right because it's a much more aesthetically and subconsciously pleasing motion. But here I have the Enterprise going right to left because it's always going the wrong direction until Spock steals the Enterprise, in which case you'll see it starts going left to right. We spent 4 days in this hospital shooting all of this stuff, and it's like we shot a short film in 1958 and attached it to a short film, a little bit longer, but short film of a Star Trek episode. I mean, you could take all of this footage from 1958 and make a short film out of it with a kind of a bizarre ending, but really the chemistry between these two, between Brian and Becky, just so palpable, so gorgeous. In the kissing scene, the not kissing scene, we shot, 3 takes of it. I was so exhausted after the first take. It was just so emotionally powerful. We see kissing all the time on TV, but to have the intense suspense of, wow, she's resisting Kirk for the first time. Just amazing, these two. I wish we could have more episodes with them. And maybe I'll develop some movies where I can cast them both opposite each other again. Really wonderful. And you can see a little bathroom off to the side there, in that door. There's no room in this place. And there's a bathroom and a little closet, which we never show because it doesn't make any sense in an asylum room. And our sound guy, Dan, we had to wedge him in there and all of his gear in this little teeny closet. He was there for 4 solid days. And it was kind of bizarre. This state mental hospital shot completely fabricated by Pony Horton, which we'll talk about in post. Now, this scene in the cafeteria is the brainchild of James Cawley coming in as a would-be psychotic Elvis. And there's the writer, by the way, going away, air drumming, Rick Chambers. There he is in the background. And there's James, former Captain Kirk, and we all like to see passing the baton to Brian Gross as Captain Kirk. We actually have an outtake of James coming in and yelling instead of saying, you're the Colonel, saying, I'm Captain Kirk. It's amazing. Of course, in the background, again, James, great idea to have Terror at 20,000 feet from Twilight Zone, which, yes, those of you phobes, it was in 1963 aired, so it would never have been airing here, but I'm just so sorry. It's too cool to pass up. And there's him panicking in the screen as Kirk panics. We'll talk more about this sound in the post-production supervisor part, but we had an issue with them. Oh, and this idea of him the doors not opening as they would in the 23rd century, that he retained some of his memory. And then how do these work? And I go by. Just so, we laughed every time it happened, and of course it's not very funny in the movie, but it just was so obtuse that he would slam his whole weight into those doors expecting them to come open. I spent so much time allowing these scenes to just unfold without rushing and letting the actors just take moments, and I was constantly telling them, please don't rush. No one's going anywhere in these scenes. People want to see you thinking and making choices. Please don't rush. This isn't Star Wars. Oh, this scene, Pony, completely fabricated. And I said, I want it to look like we're going to the Enterprise, and then, fooled you, we're still in the hospital. And that whole wall, that whole window, everything about that is a fabrication of Pony Horton. And the light from Jeff Barklage, this lighting genius who did work with Finnerman, just made this movie so beautiful. This is a scene where, very difficult scene, very vulnerable for Brian. And we worked together on trying to find the right context, and he, as you can see, really went to a very vulnerable, very dangerous, emotional place as he's trying to figure out where he is and what his future's like, and certainly who he is, a very hopeless former Captain Kirk. At the end of Act 1. And again, Tobias Richter, and I should mention again the beautiful, not again, but for the first time, the beautiful music choices of Jeff Bond just make this movie. And here, the beautiful lighting of Jeff Barklage just makes what ultimately becomes the same room used 3 different ways as McCoy's quarters, Spock's quarters, and Captain Kirk's quarters at the end. Just through the beautiful set deck and lighting, and camera work, of course, makes these rooms look all individual. Now you'll notice on the cabinet behind the Cucoloris there, the remote control that was, there it is, Spock's brain. You'll see it, and we thought it was funny to have it there that Spock would have kept the remote control that controlled him. So we thought that was fun. This scene, it didn't take much rehearsal for these 2 men to really, really nail this. Just the pain. And my instructions were really about, gentlemen, this is not about anger. This is about the pain that you both feel that is completely irresolved, that no one can quench. And the only place you both have to go is to each other. Spock has no one to go to. McCoy has no one to go to. They're both what would we classify it as? Department heads. And they're professionals, and there's no one to go to. There's no ship's counselor on board. So, just awesome. So,
Whithrow made you captain of the Enterprise. What does that tell you about the official status of James T. Kirk?
And they just don't know. All they know is that there is to see each other and try to get each other to connect with each other. It's basically 2 monologues. They're not actually listening to each other. And most of the time in acting, you're listening to the other person. Ah, yes, McCoy's pinky ring. And the power of the Vulcan, physical power of a Vulcan stopping a human emotional intent or assault that he just couldn't handle anymore. I forget who came up with that. I don't think it was me. It was one of those 2 that came up with, what if he grabs me and physically arrests me? So anyway, what I was saying is that the instructions to these 2 was, please stop listening to each other, which as an actor, you always try to listen to the other actor and respond to them. But to me, that's not life. And especially when you've got rage running between actors. In real life, you don't listen to someone else. You're always trying to say what you want to say. And conversations 90% of the time between real human beings in real life are 2 monologues, not a dialogue. And they've nailed this as 2 monologues, not listening to each other, and yet impossibly maintaining a connection on the screen. Incredibly difficult to do, and they just nail it like they were the characters. Tobias Richter once again. And my favorite scene, ladies and gentlemen, this is my favorite scene, is with Charles Root and Jeff Bond. Historically, Charles has his character, he's tried to play the James Doohan character, and just, it's not Charles's fault, it's always been sort of a caricature. And I told him right straight up, I said, this will not be Scotty caricature. I want you, Charles, to take this to where Scotty would go, not where James would have gone, James Doohan. So he went there, and both of these men, semi-inebriated, which I loved, reached so far, so vulnerable. And Charles isn't a professional actor, and Jeff done some stage. He's not a professional actor. He does all kinds of other things. Both of these men have professional careers, very little to do with acting. And in this scene, they've reached so far and got so vulnerable with each other. And here, as opposed to the last scene as a dichotomy, they are listening to each other. These are not 2 monologues. These are response versus response versus response, listening intently and correcting each other, reacting, and just changing what they're doing moment by moment. Beautiful and riveting just so proud of both of these men on this scene. Never acted together. They never even rehearsed together until they got there that day. Long scene, lots to memorize. I would put this up against, anything from the original series, and I think it's even better in some cases. So, and you can debate me all you want and say, well, but this or that, and I'm telling you, if you didn't know and you were just watching this, you would be riveted, and most people are. So I know I may be a little biased. I'm sorry, but that's how it is. I'm so pleased with this scene. And in that cup, by the way, is it's some kind of Gatorade, but I had them put a lot of lemon juice in it, so it wasn't just nice and easy to drink. It was a little bit hard. This bit here with Charles, I never told him to throw this glass down. He just went there. Again, reaching so far as an actor. And here he goes, in rage and disappointment and frustration, throwing the glass down. You can't get more integrity out of a character than that for Scotty. Here it is, Spock mind melding himself to try to get at what's going on with Brian. And there's Brian Kirk being abducted at the bar. And we see for the first time that Klingons are involved. There's Kor briefly. Something we've never seen before. Spock mind melding himself. Didn't even know it was possible, but the only way he can get at the psychic link. And for us to see, moving right here for our first scene, there's our makeup key, Brian Holloway, in the background with the paint stick, and Clay Sayre as John Colicos, as Kor, looking exactly like John Colicos. And of course Kirk, Brian bearing almost all. Enough. That force field, again, Pony Horton, we went through a lot of ideas as to how to do it, and this is a last minute, in fact, the last shots to go into the movie were these force field shots, which we'll talk about in the post commentary. This is a really bizarre and difficult scene to shoot because of the nature of our set, which is basically just, complicated wall flats. We had to move the set rather than the camera to get all of this coverage. So the set is actually what's moving. When we cut to reversals, the camera didn't really move. So right now we're looking through the door, and we're going to turn around here, but is the camera not moving there? That's actually the set. I know it's hard to imagine. The camera's facing the same direction, but we've moved the set and the actors, so it feels like we've moved the camera, the observer. But the observer has not moved, and this is a trick of Hollywood. Little reversal, Hollywood magic, we'll just call it. And the 8 tons of glycerin that Brian is wearing right now to make it look like he's sweating. One of the difficulties of shooting, we shot this at 5K. Now, some of you have heard of 1080p, and that's what most of your HD monitors are at, and 2K. And then there's 4K, which is what they do digital movies at in the theater. Well, we shot this at 5K, even bigger than that. So every little pore and blemish and everything on the faces of the actors is seen. Now, if you're watching it from the YouTube, the biggest you can watch it at is 1440, which is just shy of just more than, what is that? Bigger than 1080. Smaller than 2K. Anyway, pretty big. But it's a trip shooting at 5K. And unfortunately, this paint stick that Kent Schmidt built, it's about to come broke on this. And if you watch carefully, pulling back frame by frame, you'll see that it's actually, those barbs are now bent. You hit Brian so hard with it. We decided in this Mind Sifter scene that we were never going to see the Mind Sifter, that there was no real way to do it and be as scary as not seeing it and hearing it. That flickering light effect is stinking Jeff Barklage's genius. He put the camera shutter at a certain rate and then put LED lights on. And I was telling him, how's this going to work? How are we going to do this? How's it going to be scary? There's the all-women shift. There it is. And he says, come here, look at the monitor. And there it is flickering like some crazy device. And it's just from LED lights not in sync with the monitors. Just awesome. One of the things you'll notice about this bridge is how vibrant the screens are in the background. In fact, they're so vibrant, they're a plus black. You'll see the black against them is actually gray. And that's because Jeff decided to light this very, very low lighting so that the screens really, really pop out. It almost looked like we superimposed them in CG. But those are the actual screens, the actual lights. And one of the reasons is because the lights on the buttons are actually Christmas tree lights, and they don't give off a lot of lumens. See how they are behind Gwen there? They're really bright, really, really easy to see. But if we light it like they did in the original series, where it was 25,000 watts of lights, you would have had to pump the heck out of it to get those lights to show up. And we just don't have that kind of gear. And we don't need it. It looks just fine. And here we are with the wall flats that were once the Klingon brig, now the rec room / chapel on the Enterprise. And you're looking at just about the entire complement of extras and crew and visitors and so many great people and friends and family now, really, who are appearing here in this shot. And here's Jeff Bond, just again, letting it all hang out. Really going to a vulnerable place that I shouldn't speak of, but he has a very powerful past, and he went there for us, a very dangerous, very vulnerable place. I don't really have another way of saying where these actors have gone in this episode, but that's why I don't do it, folks. That's why I'm a director. This takes a lot of courage, more courage than you realize. And it's why it's so devastating for actors who go to these places, who are also vulnerable to get such negative response when they're just doing it out of respect to the original series and for their own craft and for the joy of idic, if you know what that means. And from the story perspective, this is just, it is what it seems. McCoy realizing he's been an ass, and to his friend, Spock. Spock is his friend as much as Kirk, and realizing that he needs to publicly apologize for his public assery. And we see this beautiful reaction from Brandon Stacy as he's on the bridge listening, realizing that he too, as a Vulcan, has also been an ass. They're about 160 meters apart on the Enterprise, but as connected as if Kirk and he were there, Spock. Beautiful color correction. We'll talk about this in the post-production super commentary by Bing Bailey. The miracles of post-production will come in there. So much of this showing up for me. If you watch this in 5.1, you'll be able to hear his voice echoing throughout the Enterprise. It's fun. And here's Jasmine. And we made a choice to replace her voice. Just it was a choice. It wasn't because if something was bad or good. It was just something that made a little bit more sense for us in post. And she did a wonderful job of desperately managing her own emotions there as she sings as Uhura. In a sense, everybody's best friend on the Enterprise is Kirk, and having him gone, much like what Whithrow says, it's not the same ship. And Spock in command, it's not the same ship, but as we'll see in a few minutes, doesn't mean it's any less efficient. Beautiful D7 Mark IV. Beautiful. And wow. I wanted that connection from her singing. As we keep hearing Amazing Grace, the old spiritual by John Newton, constantly coming back, sort of hinting at what's coming, that there is a salvation coming for them, for Kirk, in a strange way. Pony Horton, ladies and gentlemen, and Jim Bray, who created the physical model. That model is made out of styrofoam and fabric, folks. Styrofoam and fabric. And the rest of this whole thing, the sand, there's about 1,500 pounds of sand put on the floor with sparkles. Yes, there are sparkles. That is not CG. That is in the sand. And we're shooting this at about 2, maybe 3 in the morning. See the sparkles? Beautiful. And it's almost impossible to tell where Pony's pillars are and the styrofoam pillars are. He just so nailed this. Took him 3 months of working every day to get this done. And of course, I have to point out, those of you who didn't know, that's me behind Core, the other speaking Klingon with hair. And that wig is actually Sulu's wig. I'm bald, by the way, in case you didn't know. Completely bald. And that's Sulu's wig backwards. So there you're looking at Sulu's hair. Right there. That's Sulu. Imagine Sulu's face under that. But for me, it's backwards. I got to tell you, that wardrobe is really uncomfortable to be in for about 8 hours. It's not pleasant. And you got sparkles in places that should never be for days after you take it off. Really important scene for Kirk. One of the things that was a plot flaw to me that got handled with what we mentioned before with the psychic link concept between time frames is that Kirk is perfectly sane here. And we think, oh, the Mind Sifter made him insane. But no, actually, it's the link, that's the time portal link, good grief, the link between Spock and Kirk that is stretched when Kirk goes back 350 years. That causes the insanity, causes him to forget who he is, not the Mind Sifter. See, he's already been Mind Sifted. You can see the marks on his face. And we sort of had a plot flaw until Brandon figured out, really, to be fair to everybody, just because he wanted to touch Kirk and it felt right to him as an actor and the character. But we came around and created this lore that solves everything. And in the book, as Rick Chambers pointed out to me, it's the last figments of Kirk's sanity that has him leap to the Mind Sifter. Here he's deciding that he's making his plan. You can see, I'm going to jump through at the right moment. Try to see if I can get to Edith Keeler, which is his original idea. Which, you know, in a movie you can't talk about what somebody's thinking. It just has to be there on the screen. We have to see it on their face, or if we can't figure it out, we can't. So in this mode, there was no way to say, oh, he's gone insane, and watch him actually premeditatedly plot to go through the Guardian. So we just went with it, and he's perfectly sane until he goes to the Guardian. And by the way, I urge each one of you to go through frame by frame those Guardian pictures that Pony made and see what you can see. This whole opening, the teaser, and so many of these moments like this where we're at about 120 frames a second are not Star Trek. They are movie making and just how dramatic we can be. And we made the choice in a few of these places to be not Star Trek, to be dramatic and as powerful as we can be. And I actually did original music. I wrote original music for this moment here. This is a couple other moments too, where we're not Star Trek. This is not TOS. This is not how it was, and we made that conscious choice. I think it was a wise one, and no one's been upset about it so far. Here is more beautiful Pony Horton work. Look at that car go by. Folks, that's not a window. That's a cork board on a wall that he's completely made and rotoscoped. Absolutely beautiful. And the interaction, again, the chemistry between them. Oh, you notice the flickering of the lights, and drove Pony and our visual effects team crazy. Like, well, why did you do that in post? Well, we didn't do that in post. That's actually the voltage in the high school doing it. And it was so hilarious. We were cursing it. We couldn't use any of our Kinoflow lights. And then we realized, wait a minute, this is perfect, 1958 voltage. Now, what we didn't realize until we got to post was that the voltage itself dropped 1, 2, and there's a third. It drops 3 times in a row. If you go back, you'll see that it does a 3-sequence drop and then waits, and then there's another 3-sequence drop. So I have no idea what would do that. But when we were there, we couldn't tell. But when the sound design people did their work, they're like, it's in groups of 3. Oh, okay. And so we added all of that sound design, just like we added the Foley and the cloth movement and footsteps and so many other things that make a movie real. All of that cloth movement there, that's all put in. So I'm getting into post. Here we go. So back to the story. Kirk. This is a very difficult scene because you can't play it too much. You can't play too much recognition. And here he's deciding, I'm giving up on these mental images. I'm here now. I'm in 1958 and I'm going to go with this. She's beautiful. She's being nice to me. I don't know what all these other visions are, but I'm going to go with it now. And that's a powerful choice. And if you look up, you'll see the plane The plane that just flew by, that's the same plane from Terror at 20,000 feet from the Twilight Zone episode. Pony threw that in for the hell of it, which is hilarious. There's so many good Easter eggs that Pony made, which hopefully Pony will tell you about in his commentary. And this is the exterior of Ticonderoga High School, which looks very much like a 1920s built asylum, because it was built in 1928, I believe is the number. I could be wrong, off by a few years, plus or minus 5 years. And very difficult to shoot around the 2014 residential area. All that stuff you're looking at behind you there, although it's blurred, thank the Lord, is 2014. And cars and everything. But fortunately, thanks to the narrow depth of field that we use in the camera, very, very nice lenses that were actually original Coopers from the 60s that Jeff, our DP, brought. You have that original look. And all these beautiful little eye lights that were created from the gobos and all kinds of other things that we used, secret weapons that we use, and it's just absolutely amazing. You can sort of follow the timeline when it gets confusing by how degraded Kirk's Mind Sifter wounds are. Here, we're several weeks into the 1958 timeline because of those wounds are pretty well healed. And here's us with the camera on the grass, $50,000 worth of equipment sitting on the grass on a sandbag. Pretty awesome. Very, again, emotional, dangerous vulnerability for both of them in this moment. When his Mind Sifter stuff comes back. And that Mind Sifter sound we created to feel like what it was like in his head. So many of the original sounds that he was used to hearing in the 23rd century being pulled at him from Spock. Pulled from Spock to him. Now, this nice gentleman right here literally showed up on the day, had never seen the script, memorized all his lines, and dropped them like a pro in this scene. Oh, and that backdrop, see the light there? That's James brought this light. We're in a library, folks. We're in the school library, and set deck worked for I don't know how many hours. We're at like 3 in the morning, 2 in the morning on another day. That light, the sunlight you're seeing there, that's just lights. We're at night, pitch past midnight shooting this. That's all Jeff Barklage beauty. And they, set deck cleared off all of those bookshelves from all the libraries and reorganized all the library books, hundreds and hundreds of volumes. And on Becky's reverse, that's the librarian's desk and office right there. So if we were to focus into a rack, you would see 2014, stark, 1960s desk, all non-period. And I said, we turned around, it was so late, I said, Jeff, what are we going to do? He goes, watch this. Drops the camera, racks the focus to her, put that light back there, and all of a sudden we can't tell what it is. Beautiful, nice, warm, dusky light, miracle of Hollywood magic. If you look carefully, you can see the fluorescent lights in the doctor's glasses, which are a little bit of a bummer, but they're still period as far as I'm concerned. But this is a library. And then when we wrapped at about, I don't know what it was, 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, set deck spent another 2 hours because it was school the next day, putting the entire library back together. In organized fashion, the library, book for book, number for number. That's what you call heroes, folks. Amazing. And in this scene, Becky was exhausted, having done 3 days of this. And when I brought I had to bring the secretary in so that I could give her a little bit of motivation to stay in character, and it worked. She got upset and was able to use it, which was, she didn't like it. Cursed my name after, but oh well. we're good friends. In this awesome reveal, again, that light is not coming from a window. The window is a cork board, and that's a light from Jeff Barklage, making it look like sunlight. You'll notice the nice fuzz factor from the filters that we put on all these beauty shots for Rivkah, Becky. This comes from a thing called a Mitchell filter, and we had a really good time adding those filters in. You'll see here, it's not there, and you can see the difference. There it is there, and just adds that beautiful Star Trek glow, which is not really a Star Trek glow. They were using it in the 30s and the 40s, but it's kind of a secret weapon that everybody knows about. Not so secret, I suppose.
That will help your people find you.
And all that sound effects of Kirk getting dressed, it's all Foley. We couldn't actually record him getting dressed because he, of course, wasn't actually getting dressed when we shot it. And here it is, this beautiful scene of him trying to seduce her unsuccessfully. And I had to actually position their noses so we got the right angle on the kiss. And just a beautiful interaction that, like I said, I got tired watching it, watching them shoot this. I didn't know what was going to happen until here, and she just pulls away. And Brian told me that he's not done. He said, and then I went for it again. Watch this. Because he thinks he can get away with another one. Watch this. Oh, here he goes. He's going to try it again, even though she says no, because that's what Kirk would do. And here he goes. Yeah, I'm going to try. Oh, no, she holds his face back. And this reaction, we did several takes, but this is the one that made me smile every time, where he's like, I guess I'll have to keep trying. Right there. I just love that. This is Tobias Richter pulling out all kinds of stuff that we shouldn't see here, from fire extinguishers to Ethernet ports to all kinds of stuff, as we're back here in the library, which is actually the doctor's office. And that's our first assistant director, Mr. Dennis Hodson, there on the right. Very pleased to have been acting with Brian Gross in his first Star Trek New Voyages film. You can see just a little bit of the library there on the right. If you go back, you'll see just the library drawers indicating. And if you look at the books, you'll see the tape on them to indicate that they've all been library. We didn't mind that because the doctor would have everything cataloged. He's just that organized. And we are in the wee hours of the morning. Everybody very, very tired. And we're like troopers indeed, continuing on for the love of Star Trek, James Cawley, and IDIC in general. And this is, of course, in the story, the moment where Kirk is realizing that this might all be a lie. This is all not... In fact, everybody, I think, is lying to me now. And he has his flash of remembrance from the words Leonard and Doctor. But then that leads him to say his own name, which causes him to go nuts and have the Mind Sifter effect take over, which has nothing to do, really, in this movie. In the book it does, but in this movie with why he can't remember. And it may be missed, but that camera flash, if you look at frame by frame, is, again, Tobias Richter, not a real camera flash, because that camera don't do that anymore. We rehearsed that hit quite a few times so that it was safe and accurate and still looked like something. And as always, you sell it with sound design, and it makes it all seem so much more real. Again, we're going to enter a no Star Trek zone. This is not Star Trek. This is dramatic filmmaking, and it's just beautiful. This was the very first shot ever shot. And we were shooting this while we were waiting for the straitjacket, which was 5 hours late, and timing Brian turning his head while he couldn't see what was happening behind him. Very difficult. I ended up having to count to them, and they ended up timing things. So like 1, 2, 3, and move, 2, 3, 4, and move, 2, and it was kind of fun for a very first shot up. And here we are with Pony Horton creating those. Again, I like with the Guardian. Go frame by frame and watch each one of those. You will have a good time enjoying what's there. Same with the newspaper article that comes up later. Look at every line. Pony spared no expense at getting high detail involved. And like the scene with McCoy and Scotty, this is another beautiful scene where they are listening to each other now. It's not two monologues. Here in the beginning, they're neither one's listening. They're both speaking at each other with intention to say what they want to say. And once McCoy gets this out and Spock kind of countermands him with his intent, then it becomes a dialogue. Here it's two monologues. McCoy's saying what he wants to say, and you can see Spock going, well, I need to say what I need to say. And he tries to cut him off, Doctor. No, McCoy's going to keep going, because that's what a good old Southern boy does. But here he says, I need your help. And this is a huge through line that is never talked about in the book, and we created here, is that Spock has no one to go to, and he knows he has no one to go to. And he realizes, I need help. And he calls out to McCoy here in this moment, saying, because McCoy says, I can be a good listener. And Spock says, but I need you to listen to Vulcan, and I can mind meld you, teach you Vulcan, and then we can be very close, and I can get help. I need help. And McCoy refuses him. And that's why later in the transporter room, when McCoy realizes even more what an ass he's been and what a terrible friend he's been to Spock, not even helping him when he asked for help, didn't see the signs. That's why it's so shameful for McCoy when he realizes on the transporter pad when Spock says, that's why it's a logic that must be listened to and Vulcan to be understood. She doesn't say understood, but that's why it's such a brutal moment. And this is the beginning of it, not quite the payoff. But Spock, desperate, requesting help from his friend who then turns him down. It's something that's missed unless you really watch the subtext. And this beautiful close-up on both of them, lit so perfectly and acted so subtly. And here they're having the dialogue, and you can see they're listening to each other. They're not sure where they're going with this conversation. They don't know where it's going to go. McCoy may turn Spock down for his help that he's asking overtly now in his mission, and we don't know. And a little fun humor there. But it's such a great thing. You're just not sure what these actors are going to do, and that's what makes it come alive. You can have an actor who really gets the part and you believe who they are, but they're not that interesting, just like right here, but I would say, and you don't know what they're going to do. And here's Brandon and Stacy, both Brandon and Jeff, being unpredictable and mesmerizing an audience. And here is my girlfriend, Teresa Noreen, nailing the computer voice, sounding just like it. Now, James and I kind of had words over whether or not we were going to see the newspaper article or not, and I never wanted us to see the newspaper article because I thought it kind of gave it away. But you know what? James Cawley is the executive producer of the show, and I'm just a visiting director, so we do what James says. But we always have a partnership. I should be fair, and we both are committed to the show and the story and the characters. And his call was that we needed to see it. That in TOS they would have force-fed it to us, and I think it is a force-feeding to the audience, making them see what he saw, and so now we know where he's going and all of that. I thought it was better to leave it off. But it is what it is, and I think it's successful. Even in this iteration, we kind of had a little coming together of the minds and a collaboration over how it was. And every time James and I have a creative difference, it's kind of how it is. We just go, well, I want this. Well, I want this. Okay, well, how can we make it better together? And that's the kind of partnership every director dreams of with an executive producer or an executive producer team. And I love these over the shoulders of Jasmine. She's so reactive to all the things, especially as you look here in Act 4 coming up. She just does all the right moments and all the right reactions. It's awesome. Just love this bridge stuff. And here comes more Tobias Richter. Here we go. We're going left to right from here on out. And then we'll talk about the sound design, how much fun we had with this. The Planet Gateway. Nice time cut of many hours. Beautiful rack focus. Again, we're, I don't know, we might be at 8 in the evening, having started shooting at around 10 in the morning. The other Cawley, Mr. Cawley. I have a saying, when people ask me certain things that are not my call, I say JC2, which is James Cawley Call. It's a James Cawley call. JC2 in all things. And that's the way I like to keep it. End of Act 3 with Spock on the edge of his seat. More Tobias Richter. Just beautiful. And that, just so you think that's red alert, that's not red alert for those of you who don't know. That's proximity alert. And we don't have red alert until he announces red alert, and you can hear that in the dialogue there in the beginning of Act 4. He'll speak red alert, and then we hear that show up. Now, here's the thing. I fought to have this battle here at the end, and the original idea, the original script didn't have it. But to me, to see Spock in command, Spock would have trained. Spock is a Vulcan, and he would have trained and seen the most statistically efficient tactical measures against any foe, Romulan, anything, Klingon. So in the 24th century, we see the tactical playbooks, the Cisco Omega-3 maneuver, execute, so that instead of saying, oh, go to this heading and fire, go to this heading and fire, which is so slow, they just have a playbook that they fight their ships with. But this wouldn't have been invented or thought of in the 23rd century, except that Spock would have figured it out. And he would have trained his crew over the weeks incessantly. And here is the maneuver that, if you've ever played the FOSSA Starship Combat Simulator, as I did growing up, hundreds of times, this battle with the D7 Mark IV and a Connie, the most successful maneuver that would counter a D7's initial attack is the barrel roll. Not an aileron roll, a barrel roll. And it gets you out of the way of the incoming torpedo, which is what would devastate a Connie's shields, and then the disruptors can get through and cause damage because you can lock those. But if the D7's torpedo misses, then the Connie has a really good chance of fighting back and hurting the D7. But a Connie, by Connie I mean Constitution class, the Enterprise, has a very lousy first strike advantage and has no weapons in the rear. So since the D7 has to fire first, otherwise there's violation of certain treaties and things, the Connie does this barrel roll, avoids the torpedo, and then is able at the top of the barrel roll to bring its torpedoes, launchers back on and return fire. And this is my childhood dream, to see this done. And there's no one to do it except Spock in this era, because no one would have come up with tactical playbooks. We've never seen it until the next generation. So this was the only time ever that we'll ever get to see the Enterprise do a barrel roll, and rightly so, because this will be the only time that Spock will be in command and able to fight the Enterprise. Kor would have tried to take the Enterprise, knowing that a D7 Mark IV had a maximum first strike advantage. And knowing that Kirk was not captain in the Enterprise, he would have tried it. And unfortunately for him, two more, at least in the Tobias version, 2 more Connies and another class of ship show up, which is way outclassing a D7 like bad. And so he had to leave. And this scene almost got cut because we ran out of time, but thank goodness, because we were working on construction. And we had to shoot, so we shot this scene way early to get it out of the way because we knew this was a connective device. Talking about the psychic link, which in one of the versions of the script we never talked about, which I thought would have been a huge loss and an important part of this story, that psychic link, which is what keeps Kirk insane, as far as I'm concerned. And here's that incredible shame that Jeff Bond just brings up such vulnerability. And that there's a moment just to go right here, it's right here, where the 2 Vulcans look at each other when Spock says, would the Admiral have believed me? And there's a moment of racism there, 23rd century racism, because here's the 2 Vulcans going, yep, it's happened before because we're Vulcans, they don't believe us. And it harkens back to Enterprise, where Vulcans were looked at as the big daddies and all the humans hated. And again, Brandon just comes up with this stuff. And he didn't even ask me. And I'm doing this take and I go, that's the greatest thing. It says so many things and harkens back to so many storylines by just a look to he and Patrick, the two Vulcans. I just love these moments like that. And again, this is the payoff where Spock puts McCoy in his place, saying, you hurt me by not answering my cry for help and allowing me to share with you my true heart feelings, which can only be listened to in Vulcan. In Vulcan, there it is. And that. And that's actually a composite shot. Those lights on the transporter device needed to be shot twice, so we did a beauty pass on that. Yes, this room is really that color. It really is. I know, crazy. And that door, by the way, is all Pony Horton, except for the handle. He made the window and everything. Otherwise, that's just a flat door, like you'd see in a school. The window and everything in it. Now, Brian's got cotton balls in his mouth, just so we can add a little swelling to the whole ordeal, and it's highly successful. They got a little gummy after a few hours, but you guys got to know how cool these props are. These props, it's hard to tell because in post we changed the sound, but that shot, that hypo makes the psst sound. It really makes it, and it makes the sound when you push it. And what you got to know is that Jeff, I was afraid he was going to freak out because he's a total Trek fan. I thought he was going to freak out holding all of these cool tchotchke things that we only dream of holding in our hands. Well, I went to his house a couple weeks ago. He's got at least 3 of each one of those himself. So I was wondering why he was so cool about it. He's like, oh, I got these all myself, and I got tons of these. An entire garage full of models of every spaceship you can imagine. It's like every fanboy's dream. They have to pull me out of there with a stick, stretcher, something. Now, this scene we shot after we shot the hallway scene, and I'm so glad we did because in the script, it really called for a lot of emotion here when McCoy sees Kirk for the first time. But it would have been too much, I believe. It would have been too much emotion here. And then the next scene, another emotion scene. And here, I'm really glad we played it down. If we'd have shot it in another order, I would have really pushed them to go emotional and connective and sad and excited and happy tears. And it just would have been too much twice. Here we've got McCoy defending his Hippocratic oath to his captain against Dr. Hamlin's Hippocratic oath. The same oath, 400 years apart, 300 years apart, 350 years apart. And yet they're both defending their patient, and having that kind of aggression towards each other was far more the right subject for the scene. And here we are in green. And as the psychic link is reunited, it turns back to warm colors for the first time. The hospital is warm, and we had that little sound design. This is all Brandon. This is what started it all. This whole touch scene that turned this whole story into the lore that we know and love. This scene was probably the most difficult scene for me to shoot because originally we had the scene opening with 3 orderlies passed out on the ground and Spock having nerve pinched them all. And they come around the corner and he says, oh, they're sleeping. And I had I had 3 of these actors in my face saying, well, if that would have happened, then Hamlin would have done this. And literally for a half an hour we were waiting, hours behind them, basically putting me on the spot and saying, look, if you're in charge of the character integrity of the integrity of these characters, then we got to tell you, this is a breach in our integrity. And boy, they were right. And we got rid of that comedy bit, and it kept it intense, kept the beauty of it. And unfortunately, we put a bunch of guys in makeup and wardrobe and had them get out of makeup for no reason. But it was the right choice. And sometimes you just got to trust that the actors that you've built a rapport with and built trust with are right. Now, unfortunately, this was day 1, shot 1 for both Brandon and Jeff. I'd never worked with Brandon in this shot. This was our first time meeting and working together. We just spent 5.5 hours trying to get his makeup right. And we got it right, and for the rest of the shoot, and Jeff, and so here's him just in my face saying, no, this is not how I like it, and Becky the same, and it was an intense struggle of creative ability and will, but it turned out to be exactly the right choices, and sometimes you just have to trust that the actors that you know and love who have been doing right for you are right, and as a director, you got to go with it sometimes. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes you know you have a bigger picture, but I, in this case, didn't have the bigger picture. I wanted the comedy really badly, and I thought it was going to be fun, but I put on the editor hat for a moment and talked with Rick, the writer, and we just realized, that has to go. It just isn't the right way to do it, and they were right. And this just beautiful scene. There's our eyelight. Everything about this is right. Everything. We wouldn't want it any different. You couldn't make it better. I don't care what series you're in, whether it's with William Shatner or Brian Gross. That's great filmmaking and great acting and great everything. I'm not just tooting my horn. This is the whole crew we're talking about and the actors. This whole scene is just, and for me, it's such a personal triumph because it was such a ridiculous scene, it's a ridiculously difficult scene to shoot, trying to get angles in this weird hallway that we got stuck in because the principal came down and yelled at us because we were making too much noise. So we were relegated to this very 50s looking hallway, but it was incredibly small and no space, and we ran out of light, and there's a big window, and it was a production nightmare, but it was the most important scene, and thank the Lord, God Almighty, it turned out like this. And the editing of it was very, very simple. It was very clear how we needed to do it. And again, the Vulcan mind meld is this theme that we never see done until here. We talk about it, it's the lore behind everything, but we never see it done until here. And again, I just love staying with these actors. I would have stayed with them longer if I thought I could get away with it, but I had to get out of that scene. It was, every time I watched it, it was breaking me up. Station K7, which we see a lot of in these series. And here's again Uhura in the captain's chair. And if you listen carefully to Sulu's button pushes as he does his tirade, they get longer and longer and longer. Until the third one is very long. Burn! And that's our sound design team. Kenny Givens. And there's that filter again on Jasmine. You got to know what it's like to be on this bridge. When you're really there, it's... Sometimes when you're on a film set, you're like, well, that isn't like what it is in real life. That isn't what it looks like on television. But when you turn the lights on this, you are on the Enterprise. You are there. It is not like, it's a film set. It's not real. No, you are there. And James has built this thing like, you can't believe it is exactly the thing. Exactly. And you walk around the bridge just like Kirk does here. And if you've had the incredible joy of being able to be on this particular bridge, it's such a wonderful experience, even if no one's around. Now on that first take, Jeff nearly knocks Brian over. He hits him so hard, so we had to take the take in. And he's about to go to the doors. They don't open, and then they open. And by the way, those doors, I'm sure you know, are pulled by unseen crew behind, and we have to yell, "Doors!" to get them to open and close. By the way, this shot is one of the most difficult shots in all of cinema to do. Even if you have a focus puller, someone who follows the focus. You see we're dead on his eyeball there from what is a focal length pull that is almost impossible to do. And Jeff was actually doing the focus pull and the operation, and he was doing everything. It's impossible, and he's one of the most talented camera operators, not just director of photography there is. Same room, guys, but this is actually the captain's quarters. Same set room, different lighting, different props. That silver plant vase there is actually a dead right replica from the original series that James could never find and had to print, 3D print. It's amazing. That's how committed he is to the details of this show. Originally, this was scripted in the turbo lift. They walk out of the bridge, the last scene, and Spock joins him. We shot it that way, but it just never worked. And my instructions to Brian on this is his first scene as Captain Kirk. Real Captain Kirk. And my instructions to him were that what makes this scene great is the play that Kirk has with Spock, knowing that Spock is unflappable. And my instructions to Brian was, imagine that Brandon has a big red clown nose on his nose, the entire scene, and he doesn't know it. And that really inspired Brian to keep the banter and the happiness going. And when you imagine it too, you can see why he's playing it the way he's playing it. Which is fun, light, after all this intense emotion. And what we love about these two is their play that they have together. And Brandon really showing just ever so slight pleasure, just enough. And I've gone on record in saying that Brandon, of any Spock, including Leonard, is my favorite Spock. He plays Spock as I believe a Vulcan who's half human would really be played. And he nails it. He nailed it in K'tumba. He's nailed it in so many different things. And it's really great. And again, I love what Brian does here. He's not playing Shatner. He's playing Kirk, as Shatner would have had, as Kirk would be from so many other volumes, books and other, how Kirk really is, not just how Shatner plays Kirk. And that's the end of the episode, folks. It's an incredible journey, an incredible story, and for me as a director, balancing so many aspects of the story and the characters, and then these amazing actors and crew. If you have the opportunity to come be with New Voyages, I strongly recommend taking some of your vacation time in June or July and getting out to Ticonderoga, and just hanging out. They'll put you to work. Plenty of things to do on set, and plenty of opportunities to meet incredible people who are all about IDIC, all about supporting and making the world a better place through Star Trek and Gene's original vision. And what are you going to do? That's what life is all about. Clap, clap. And same with the people in post. Unfortunately, you can't come visit us in post because we're all over the world. But we all have the same feeling. Thanks all very much for watching and supporting New Voyages and Star Trek in general, and what Roddenberry had in mind as IDIC for the world and what it was all about. And I personally thank you for supporting me and this incredible story and cast with all of your great comments and support. Thanks very much, and we'll see you in the next ones.
This isn't the first time you've had to deal with an attractive woman.
Bones. I have no romantic interest in her. That would be wrong and improper as a captain.
Oh, I agree, but that's not what I meant.
I need to explore all possibilities, including sabotage.
Well, that's one possibility I won't consider.
If someone out there has a weapon of that power, we have to know, is there an alien ship or not?
Or maybe I'm just plain stupid.
Okay, you are going way over the top on this.
Over the top? I have barely left the launch pad.
Dr. Marcus, shut up. Alien vessel. This is Captain James T. Kirk.
She's charging her weapons.
All hands red alert. Raise shields. Stand by phasers.
I'm William Mulholland. Bothered me about the whole thing. For years now, idiot socialists like Job Harriman and the gullible saps who followed him have been accusing me of either being in cahoots with the San Fernando Valley land speculators like Otis and Chandler and Whitley, or of being their patsy. I was absolutely opposed to the subdivision of the San Fernando Valley. Arable lands which should have sold for about $100 an acre had been seized by a few capitalists who then forced the prices to $1,000 an acre. I don't care what anyone says. I have never and will never accept payoffs from the San Fernando Valley Land Syndicate. This water is for the city of Los Angeles. No kickback deals with my ditch. If that's what they want, they can bloody well go to Chinatown. Instead of being developed as agricultural lands, the property was subdivided into town lots and small rich men's country estates at prohibitive values. But even if it had stayed agricultural, they still shouldn't have been simply entitled to water. As far as I was concerned, the Owens River water was intended for the city of Los Angeles first. If the ranchers in the San Fernando Valley wanted it, I told them they'd have to build their own water system or irrigation district at their own expense. Even then, they'd only be able to use surplus water, which they'd have to pay for. I mean, my aqueduct wasn't meant to be a giant garden hose for the San Fernando Valley, you know. No siree.